Everything's changing in PR these days, so now what? In a market where everyone is talking but few are truly listening, customer engagement is the ultimate differentiator. Today, we're sharing tips around customer engagement and building customer advisory councils to shape smarter strategies, stronger products, and sharper stories. So today we're talking customer engagement, and you and I just got back from our client's customer advisory council event, a very fun program that we helped our client put together. It's a twice a year event that they use to bring real customers into the office basically and foster a two-way conversation. Could you talk a little bit about like how this program came around and why we do it?
What a great event last week. It was so good to see you in person, James. So for this particular client, we kicked off this customer advisory program in 2023. This was a result of some customer feedback. So they saw a decrease in their customer satisfaction scores from surveys they do quarterly for their customers. And we saw this as an opportunity to bring those customers into the fold and really gather their feedback and form a two-way conversation.
We talk a lot these days, we talk a lot these days about customers need to, they want to be heard, right? And that's not necessarily a new phenomenon, but it's got more importance than really ever before, right? In today's kind of economic and political climate, right? Customers, both for, B2C and B2B companies, are kind of on edge a little bit. And if the goal is to get your customer to, spend more money with you and kind of deepen their engagement with you, right? You need to make sure that you're having a conversation with them and not just treating them like, just like a faceless customer, right? Customers need to be heard, and they want to have direct impact on how it is they engage with your product or your service, right? So for our client, who's a consumer facing client, when they realized that, they were kind of just pushing messages out to folks and they weren't necessarily being heard or received in the way that they wanted to, there was an opportunity that, we saw to kind of help like physically bring people in and have a deeper kind of a two-way conversation, like you said, to better explain, what it is that they do and the decision-making process that goes into different things, right? To help these customers better understand how things work. It's not only to help them like better understand, to help them get actual value out of the service, right? And if customers feel like they have a voice and that they're truly heard and that their feedback is going to, make it into decisions that the companies make, then that engenders, better feelings about that company. It's kind of like on its face, kind of obvious, but so few companies do a really good job at prioritizing this engagement kind of loop, right? So when it comes to being heard, in your mind, what does that actually mean from the customer standpoint, and why is it so important to you?
Yeah, I think for brands, companies, B2B, B2C, it helps with their credibility if they're listening to their customers and they're tailoring their messaging to the customer or doing product updates that the customer requested or actually listening to their customers. I think it helps their customers view them as a more trustworthy source.
What does that actually mean in your mind when it comes to the customer's point of view?
For the customer's point of view, I think they want to know that they're being heard, but that means that if they're participating in a survey that you're putting out or they're responding to the content you're putting out on LinkedIn, just that the company acknowledges that this was noted and there's been a change that's been made, or you as the company, B2C, any brand, you're acknowledging that and noting that, hey, this was a request from our customers and we noticed that you want this change or you want this implemented and here's what we did about it. And it's taking the action and making it a two-way conversation and not just being broadcast. Like, here's new product features, but why did we create those product features? It's because we listened to our customers and we addressed what you guys wanted.
Yeah, exactly. If you think about like traditional kind of marketing funnel, right? Where, customer engagement previously was kind of like, all right, they've expressed interest, right? They move down to, the next further down the funnel, right? And that means we send them an email or we send them a promo code or whatever it is, right? To kind of keep them in the loop and keep them in the funnel, right? And that's fine. And that, a marketing funnel, I guess, like works really well as like an organizational tool, right? But unless you're putting a dedicated, effort into, enriching their experience, not just through like an offer or whatever, but like actually seeking feedback, listening, and trying to kind of build that trust, you have to do it, right? Otherwise, it's just kind of a transactional relationship. The customer just feels like, you just want me for my dollar, right? You don't really care what I have to say. If you, as a company, prioritize getting their feedback, right, then they feel more valued, right? And they feel like that they have an impact on where this is going, right? That's going to make them a lot, stickier with, to your business, right? So one of those ways that we have put this into action is by helping our client build a customer advisory council. Maybe you could talk a little bit about like why this council has become in particular so important to the day-to-day operations for our client, and why is it such a powerful tool? How has this been a game changer from your perspective for their business?
What I find really beneficial is the face-to-face interaction with the executives and the customers. So customers come into these meetings twice a year. We have a group of around 20 customers that meet with different members of the executive team and of different departments within the organization. So throughout the 3 years we've had this council, we've had multiple spokespeople for the company engage with customers and get that feedback direct from them and address questions live. So if there's something, so for example, like a new product feature rolls out or a new customer portal rolls out and people are having issues, they can voice those there at that meeting live and get direct feedback. And then the organization then knows, okay, this is what customers are struggling with, this new portal, this new rollout. Here's how we can put up a FAQ on our site and address those questions so that it's not just this one customer in this one meeting that's getting that information, but we can share that with the rest of our customers.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because in our seat, right, we are like, yeah, the company knows everything about their customers, right? In theory, right? We think we know what they want to hear, right? And so we design, our programs around that, right? Any company, right, has certain messaging that they want to get out there. And so, yeah, we put that out there, right? Well, if the customer wants to hear something completely different and we're not getting that feedback from them, then and we're not having that two-way conversation that we want to have, right? So this council in particular has been really instrumental in, hey, we think you want to hear about X, right? But really, you're telling us you want to hear about Y. And it's helped us better target, better focus what it is we do from a messaging standpoint. And obviously, we have different channels in which we engage with these customers, but having a better sense of like what it is they care about in some cases has been a little different, right, than what we have initially thought. So that's been really, really important. I think also like from a B2B perspective, right, a customer advisory council helps us better source like storytelling opportunities too. Like we have another client that's, in a totally different industry, right? They have a lot of customers that want to help like explain the value of the product, right? Explain, how they help their customers, right, through the use of this technology. And if you don't have customers that are like excited to like help you and share in that storytelling effort, it's hard to then in turn go and get media, right? Reporters care about real successes or failures, right? Real stories. They don't care about the product update, right, that we just kind of spit out via press release. They want to hear about like how your product is actually being used in the real world and the impact that it's having, right? And so if you don't have customers that are willing to like advise you and kind of help shape that story and be an active participant in that effort, then it's really hard to A, get feedback on the actual product itself, but B, then in turn go use that to help with your broader marketing efforts. We were just chatting with a prospect the other day and we asked, do you have a customer advisory council? And they were like, not really. And it was like, okay, well, you want to do a lot of like customer centric PR. That's gonna be hard if you're not getting those insights on a regular basis, right? So, like in your mind, what happens after you gather like customer feedback? How have we kind of in turn gone and used that to drive measurable outcomes?
What happens after is just as important as the gathering aspect. So you want to know what your customers think. You want to know what they want improved or just any feedback that they have, positive, negative. And then as the company, you want to publicly address that. So just make it known that we hear you, we have your feedback, we hear you, now we're acting on it. So it's again that credibility, that validity, just we understand you and we're making changes. Once you have that feedback, there's so many things that you can do with that, whether that's tailoring your messaging. So if you know your customer, like their pain point is timeliness. From when I sign on and use your product, I want to be up and running in a week. Okay, let's tailor our messaging to that. Like on our website, let's say average customer is up and running in 7 days. Like just making those proof points so that other groups in the funnel see like, oh, that's what's important to me. That's what I'm recognizing and what I will act on.
Yep. Yep. Makes sense. We've seen like real world examples of how like the end product of this conversation, right? I think of, if we go back to our consumer facing client, I think of a specific example where we got a piece of feedback from a customer that they were like, I don't think enough people know about this topic, and I think you need to make sure that you've got more messaging around this topic, right? Fast forward to like a month later, we wrote this thought leadership piece on behalf of our client. We got it placed with a publication, and then the next time we saw that customer at the next advisory council, they were like, hey, we saw that piece, and like, it had the messaging that we were kind of looking for that we talked about last time. She felt really good about kind of the start to finish and that she had a real impact in that. It's one small example, but that's the kind of thing where, you could see instantly on her face, like she was like, hey, like I had an impact in that, right? And that's like, I feel valued, I feel heard, right? And I think as a customer that other customers also want to hear that kind of thing, right? So it was really nice to just kind of like see that come to fruition. It's the same thing with in the B2B world. We had a client that one of their customers was like, hey, I use your product in this way, but it doesn't really change my business, right? And so that our client got that feedback and is like re-engineering a lot of how they talk about their product and service to explain what that real kind of added value is beyond just an infrastructure tool. And so it works the same way, right? You get the end result, whether you're a B2B or a B2C company, right? The end result is the same. And it's all about refining what it is your product or service offers and how you talk about it to your customers. And it's just, if you're not creating that endless kind of feedback loop, right, you're leaving opportunities on the table.
Another example is something fun. It was naming a new service offering. So the executive team was going through a list of potential names for this new product, and we turned it to the council. Like, hey, council, here's 5 options. What resonates with you? How do you feel about this? Or what are your recommendations? Like, if you have other suggestions, we're open to gathering those. And from that feedback, the one that was selected by the majority ended up being the end result name. And they'd recognize that at our next meeting. Like, hey, that's what I chose. I named that.
Yeah. It's essentially like a focus group, right? Like, I don't know how much like startups are doing focus groups these days, right? My guess is not that much. It's kind of a, I guess, like older school way of soliciting feedback from clients or from customers, but it's still really important, and may not be like a formal like setting of a focus group, but it functions the same way, right? You're soliciting feedback. I mean, how many times have we seen like a new startup or a new product kind of roll out and they've got like just like the goofiest name, right? Or just as like a small example, like how did they decide that, right? And it's like, because they didn't talk to a customer. Maybe they did, and the customers told them like, hey, that's great. But it's more often than not, right? We see somebody like walk back like the name of a product or a logo or a certain message, and they're like, okay, we heard you loud and clear, but right at that point there's been damage done, right? And
Yeah.
trust has been eroded, right? I think of the I think of the Cracker Barrel example, right?
Yes.
Where they put out the new logo and everyone was like, what the hell is that? Get that, bring back the old logo. And they clearly didn't talk to their customers and figure out like how much their customers value that logo, right? Kind of an off the wall example, but I think it's illustrative of what we're talking about here. So like if you're a brand new company and you haven't done a customer advisory council before, but you kind of want to, can you talk about like how do you get this going? How do you set up a customer advisory council that works and functions the way that you want?
I think the first step for setting up a customer advisory council, if you have particular customers that are often calling customer service or chatting with support, maybe those people are priority targets first off, just making sure that you're addressing the customers that are in need the most. And I think from there, it's really about diversity within your customer base. So
That's really important. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking your customers are all the same, right? You have a certain product or service, everybody wants it. It's easy to fall into that line of thinking. Getting response from a diverse set of your customers and hearing about how they interact with your product or service differently is super important, right? You can't just have the one way of doing things, right? You have your customers, even though they all might be buying the same thing, they might be doing it for different reasons, right? Or their motivations are different. And
because all
so,
of their organizations are different. Like they're
yeah,
using your product or service, but that they're still from different organizations that function differently and have like they're supporting their own customers. So I think every voice is a different voice that you should hear.
yeah, yeah. And I think you raised a really good point about like if you've got a cranky customer, it's easy to like ignore them or say, they don't get it or they're crazy, and it's easy to kind of slough them off, right? But like those are like bright red flashing light opportunities to hear what it is they have to say. If they're having a real struggle with your service for whatever reason, like you need to understand why and what that is, right? And work to fix that. It's easy for one, crabby customer to, kind of, I guess, poison the well, right? Like if you don't hear them and you don't take steps to meet their concerns head on, you risk that spiraling out of control a little bit, right? So it's a really good point. Like it's perhaps a little counterintuitive or a little scary. You don't want to necessarily like engage with the cranky customer, but it's absolutely mission critical.
You have your diverse group of customers. Next is the format of your council. So are these in-person meetings? Are these quarterly surveys? Like how deep do you want to get in engagement with your customers? So for the council that we've been talking about in particular, we do 2 meetings a year, and to set those agendas, we gather feedback on what topics are most important to these customers. So, what topics do you want to discuss? What questions do you have that we can provide answers to? What might not be clear, or what do you need help with? And that's one way that we set the agenda. So, it's not only getting the right group of customers, but it's making those meetings valuable and really listening to them and discussing what they want to discuss. So we set the agenda, and we obviously want to get certain things out of it. Like if we have a new service rolling out and we want to discuss that, so we'll fit that in, but it's also listening to what they want to talk about.
Yeah, 100%. And it's fun too because we've heard from some of these repeat customers that have been a couple times to the council meetings, right? They kind of in turn like take what they learn and and what they hear at these meetings, and they go and tell their friends and neighbors, right? They kind of become advocates for our client, right? Which is great. And that's it kind of is influencer marketing light. They go out and they kind of share the gospel of what we're trying to communicate, and that's been like really really helpful too. We've had folks been like, hey, I told my neighbors that I went and learned all of this like amazing stuff, and I feel like I was heard, and now they want to come in and participate, right, and share their feedback. Once you get these councils kind of humming, the momentum like really kind of starts to pick up, and it becomes this living breathing kind of program of its own, right? And at this point, I think it's fair to say for our client who we've been doing this with for almost 3 years now, like this is a vital piece of their of their business and how they shape, what it is they do, right? And if this program wasn't in place, they'd still be, battling those kinds of, rough customer feedback, and comments that they would get all the time, right? At the beginning, it might be hard to help a new startup understand like that this is worth putting the time and effort into. They're so focused on sales, 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 and product, 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 and rightfully so. But if they're not making the effort to solicit feedback and refine, what it is they're doing, they're in trouble or they're missing opportunities, right? There's a real need to put an effort into this, and it's hard to show the value up front. Like we can explain, this is why you want to do it, right? But if you could just like fast forward a year or two, right, you would really understand, Mr. Client, like why you want to do this. And it's obviously a really important and really powerful thing. Once you get it going, you just got to put the effort in.
Exactly. So you have your diverse council, you have your agenda and your meeting set, you have the meeting, like a great productive meeting, customers fully engaged, executive team listening, providing guidance, answering questions. What's next? Like in addition to that feedback gathering portion, so what we do is a post-meeting survey, and this is also very valuable, and we learn a lot from these surveys. So after the meeting, we send everyone a survey. It asks questions like, were the topics that we covered relevant? Did you feel your voice was heard? What topics are you interested in discussing next time we have a meeting? Are there any questions that we could answer in the interim between these meeting times? Or questions like that. So we gather that feedback. We then put that in a report and share that with the client. And from there, as PR and marketing, we plan our next round of communications for the next quarter, half year. So a topic like X topic might be of particular interest. So we know, okay, that now it's time for thought leadership around that topic. It's time for blog posts around that topic. Let's do a social media series highlighting that topic and just really emphasizing those messages and what the customer gave us feedback on.
I think it's easy for people who do set up the advisory council. They forget that last step, right? A lot of times they forget the measurement part of this. Like, is what we're doing working, and are we getting the value out of this program that we want to, right? We're not just setting up the advisory council just because it's a thing we think we should do, right? We're actually checking to make sure that it works and we're getting what we want out of it, right?
Yeah. It's about value. Like, you want value out of it, but also your customers should have value out of it. If it's not working for your customer, then it's not working for you. James, as we wrap up this conversation, what's your top tip to take away from this?
Yeah. So my top tip is, with any customer advisory council, the number one goal, you want to earn and strengthen your customers' trust, right? That should be your North Star for what you're doing this whole program for. And so, we talked about how trust is hard to come by these days. People are skeptical. People are naturally looking for reasons to not engage with you. Everything that you do in this program has to be towards earning that trust, right? Once you have their trust, they're your customers for life, right? And so you want to make sure that that's the priority at all times.